I was there, in the dusty attic of my childhood's house when I found the old box. I felt the wood worn under my fingers, a relic of time, and a sense of nostalgia involved me. The air was heavy, full of unvitful memories and whispered secrets. My heart hit faster when I spotted the ajar lid, almost as if the box was waiting for me, patient, over all these years. Inside, between faded photos and yellowish letters, it was resting a map, a piece of crumpled paper, with hand-muffed lines, almost like a whisper of my father's past. The lines were shaky, as if every stroke had been done with the urgency of someone who knew time was against him. I saw whole cities crossed, streets that knew only by the names and stories, and some lines that ended abruptly in symbols that seemed indecipherable puzzles. My father, a man of few words, always had a glow of mystery in his eyes. He was like a walking maze, ever present, but with parts of his soul always out of reach. Since he disappeared, the void he left was like a constant shadow, a silent reminder of unanswered questions. Holding that map was like touching a lost fragment of it. I felt the connection, as if he were there beside me, guiding my hands on the paper. The idea of ignoring it never crossed my mind. It was an invitation, a challenge, a promise that by following those lines, I could find more than just the way he had traced. I could find him. The decision was almost instinctive. I took the map, bending it carefully, as if he could undo any time, and put it in the pocket of my coat. Each brand seemed to be pulsate with its own energy, a trail that begged to be traveled. I was determined to follow each line, each curve, each strange symbol. It was as if, in doing so, I could hear my father's voice again, feel his presence, and perhaps, just perhaps, to understand why he had disappeared and what he was trying to tell me. The journey promised to be long and full of uncertainty, but I was ready. At that moment, in the dust and silence of the attic, I made a promise to myself not to rest until it follows each line of that map, until it decipher each symbol, until I find my father, or at least the truth about its disappearance. I was ready to follow his trail, hoping that in the end he was waiting for me with open arms. I was there, sitting on the edge of my bed, holding the map that seemed to throb its own life. The rough roll against my skin was a tangible reminder of my father, an almost ghostly presence that seemed to manifest at that moment. My father disappeared when I was 12, and since then, the idea of seeing him again was a dream I never wanted to wake up. That fateful day, he kissed me on the forehead, something he rarely did, and said he had to solve something important. His words were like a puzzle I could never decipher, a farewell wrapped in mystery. He never came back. The days that followed were a blur with unknown faces, muffled whispers, and murmurs of concern. The police came, asked questions, searched our house as if every corner could hide the answer. But in the end, everything dissolved in silence. A silence that settled like a shadow, echoing in every room, every corridor, as if on the stretch, waiting for the right time to swallow what was left of our family. It was a silence that spoke more than any word said. He shouted the absence, the lack, the void that had settled in our lives. I looked, I called, waited. I hoped to see him in the door, with that quiet smile he always carried, as if he said that everything would look good. But the door remained closed, and time dragged out without mercy. Already adult, years later, immersed the task of organizing his things in the attic, my mind wandered by memories of a time when life seemed simpler. The smell of dust and old wood was familiar and comforting, like a hug from a lost time. It was then that I found the box, a remedy of memories that I didn't expect to find out. When opening, the map view was like lightning, an electric discharge that traveled my body, rekindling a hope that I had buried a long time ago. On the back of the map, a sentence written with my father's firm handwriting: "Follow only if it's ready." These words were a challenge and a warning, a fine line between courage and fear. I wondered if it was ready, if I could unravel what he had left behind. But deep down, the answer was already clear. I knew right now that I had no choice but to follow. No matter what to find on the way, the search for my father. It was the only thing that made sense, the only way to fill the void he left. The map was my only track, a path outlined by someone who knew more than I could imagine. It was a promise of answers, reunion, or at least understanding. The connection with my father never completely broke. and this map was proof of that. It was time to move on, to see where those lines would take me, to face whatever was on the other side. I needed to know the truth. I needed to find my father, or at least understand what he thought was so important to leave us. With the map in hand, I felt a renewed determination. He knew the way would be long, perhaps dangerous, but also full of discoveries. At that moment, in the silence of the attic, I realized that I was ready to follow my father's trail. I was ready to face whatever it was, as long as it took me to him or the truth he made hidden. And so, with my heart throbbing with hope and fear, I took the first step toward the unknown. I was there, in the old train station, a place that seemed to have been swallowed over time. The worn architecture, with exposed bricks and broken windows, was a silent testimony of better days, when arrivals and matches filled the air of expectations and farewells. Now, all that was left was the echo of lonely steps and the whisper of the wind that passed through the openings, as if told stories of forgotten passengers. The wooden floor creeps under my weight. Every step reminds that time does not wait for anyone. The station had an aura of mystery, an almost palpable presence of kept secrets. I felt a shiver through my spine as I approached the worn wooden bench, the same as my father so often, and I occupy our visits to the place. It was there that he used to tell me stories of travel we never did, places that only existed in his fertile imagination. Sitting there now was like reliving a fragment of those memories, a reflection of a time I longed to recover. In the bank, an unexpected object was waiting for my arrival, as if I knew I would come. An old yellowed photo was resting there, a tangible reminder of our shared past. In the image, my father held me on my lap, his warm smile radiating a love that transcended his disappearance. I felt my heart tighten as my fingers gently traced the faded contours of photography, capturing a moment that seemed immortalized in another universe, where he was still present. When I turned the picture, my heart was faltered when I saw the date written on the back. It was the exact day when he disappeared, a detail that could not be coincidence. The words were like a whisper of the past, a coded message that was only beginning to make sense. It was as if my father was talking to me, through time and space, guiding me for a journey he knew I needed to do. The discovery was a mix of conflicting emotions. There was the bittersweet joy of finding something he had touched, a fragment of his presence that gave me the strength to continue. But there was also the weight of uncertainty, the fear of what I could find out when following its clues. The photo was more than a memory. It was a key to a mystery that promised answers to questions I barely knew how to formulate. I stayed there for a few minutes, absorbing the weight of the revelation. The silence of the season seemed to get involved, almost as if I was encouraging me to proceed, not to give up. I knew I couldn't stop there, that there was more to find out, more hidden clues in places than only my father and I shared. The photo was the first step, a reminder that he was still with me, that he wanted me to find him, or at least understand what took him from. With the photo carefully stored in the pocket of my coat, I felt a renewed determination. The old train station may have been just the beginning, but it was a powerful start, a place steeped in stories and unfulfilled promises. As I walked away, the distant sound of an imaginary train reverberated in my mind, a metaphor for the journey I was about to undertake. It was time to move on, to chase every track, to unravel every secret my father had left behind. I knew the way would be difficult, but the promise of answers and the possibility of finding my father made each step worthwhile. I was there, in front of the lonely roadside warehouse, a silent giant made of metal and concrete that seemed to contain more than just forgotten goods. The wind blew hard, raising dust and dried leaves that danced in chaotic spirals, as if they tried to form words that I could not understand. The doors were closed, keeping their secrets with one of termination that almost made me back down. But there was something in that place that begged for attention, an almost audible call that pushed me forward. Through a dusty window, I managed to glimpse the interior. Boxes were stacked in irregular columns, grotesque shadows projecting into the filtered light that drained by roof cracks. My heart accelerated with the idea that within that chaos there could be something my father wanted me to find. The promise of answers, of more fragments of his presence, made me look for an alternative entry, a path that allowed me to unravel what was hidden. Surrounding the warehouse, I found a door of the back, almost like an invitation to enter. The creak of the hinges echoed in the empty space, a sound that reverberated like a muffled scream. I hesitated for a moment, taking a deep breath, the cold, damp air emanating from the inside, before taking the first step inside. The smell of old paper and damp wood enveloped me, bringing a strange familiarity that calmed my nerves. In the heart of the warehouse, a box stood out among the others, as if waiting to be discovered. As I approached me, the dust rose smoothly, floating in the light as ghosts of a not-so-distant past. I opened the lid carefully, revealing a collection of notebooks that, at first glance, seemed common. But holding them, I felt the unmistakable connection with my father, as if their hands were still there, guiding me. Flipping the pages, I realized that I was facing something much bigger than you had imagined. The notes were meticulous, each line drawn with the same careful accuracy I recognized on your map. There were lists of names, dates, places, a tangle of information that seemed to follow a pattern that I couldn't decipher yet. But what really caught my attention was the names circulated in red, each highlighted with an urgency that could not be ignored. A chill sensation traveled my spine as they realized that all those names belonged to missing people in the region over the last 20 years. It was as if my father is building a puzzle, each piece a lost life, an interrupted story. The presence of his handwriting on the pages, the weight of the words he had chosen to highlight, all created an image of a man trying to solve a puzzle that had consumed him. I was there, surrounded by boxes and notebooks, as my mind was trying to process the implications of what had discovered. Why was my father investigating these disappearances? What connection did he have with these people? The search for answers intensified within me, an insatiable hunger that burned with the promise of hidden truths. Each circulated name seemed to be throbbing with its own energy, every story asking to be told, to be heard. The weight of this responsibility did not go unnoticed. I was in possession of something my father had considered important enough to register, to preserve. At that moment, I realized that following his trail was not only a search for him, but also for justice for those lives interrupted. I closed the notebook with renewed determination, keeping it carefully. He knew that every note, every detail, could be a key to the mystery my father had tried to unravel. With a heavy heart of questions and a firm determination to find all the answers, I left the warehouse, taking with me more than clues, bringing a legacy that now fit me understand and conclude. The wind was still blowing outside, but now it seemed to carry a new purpose. I was ready to gather the fragments left by my father, to sow the stories of those who disappeared and perhaps find the way back to him. The road ahead promised to be long and full of revelations, but I was determined to follow each track, each line drawn by my father, until the truth was finally revealed. I was there, standing in the heart of the forest, surrounded by old trees and silent witnesses of time. The soft sound of the leaves whispering in the wind was the only soundtrack as I approached the third point on my father's map. The clearing came before me like a safe haven amid the green vastness, an open space where the sky was revealed in a deep blue, dotted by passing clouds. The feeling was to be in a sacred place, where nature joined the human mystery in an almost mystical dance. On the floor, stones arranged in a circle formed a pattern that seemed deliberate, as if someone at some point had devoted time to creating that configuration. In the center of the circle, the symbol that I longed for seeing more closely, 3 cross lines, forming something that resembled a star, a drawing that seemed to throb with hidden meanings. The vision of that symbol, so meticulously portrayed on the map, brought a sens déjà vu's action, as if I had been there before, in a past life, or in a forgotten dream. I approached with caution, almost fearing to break the delicate harmony of that space. Each step was thoughtful, my heart beat with a mixture of excitement and reverence. When I knelt beside the circle, time seemed to stop, and the forest around me fell silent, as if waiting for what I would do next. I stretched my hand and touched one of the stones, feeling its cold, rough surface under my fingers, a tangible reminder that it was not a dream, but a reality that I was intended to unravel. It was then that I noticed the initials recorded in one of the stones, DM. My heart leaps to recognizing the letters that belonged to my father. It was like a signature, a seal of authenticity, a confirmation that he had been there, in that same place, perhaps with the same feelings of hope and doubt that now consumed me. The initials were a direct connection with him, an invisible bond that transcended time and space. I sat in the center of the circle, the symbol designed on the earth below me. I closed my eyes for a moment, allowing the energy of the place to involve me completely. It was as if every stone, each leaf, every wind, conspiring to tell me a story, to reveal a secret that only I could understand. At that moment, I felt the presence of my father stronger than ever, almost as if he were there, beside me, whispering words of encouragement. Reopening my eyes, I began to examine the symbol more carefully. The 3 intertwined lines formed a figure that looked simple at first glance, but there was something deeper there. It was a puzzle, a key that promised to open doors to answers that I sought so much. As he traced the outline with his finger, an ancient memory emerged, a story that my father used to tell about guide stars who were driving lost travelers home. This symbol, I thought, was perhaps his way of guiding me, of showing my way back to him. The wind blew again, bringing a familiar smell of wet earth and life in its purest essence. The clearing, with its circle of stones and enigmatic symbol, was more than one point on the map. It was a place of power, a link between what was and what is coming. I knew I needed to understand the complete meaning of that symbol, that it was the key to the next step of my journey. With a deep sigh, I got up, feeling the weight of responsibility and the promise of future discoveries. My father's initials recorded on the stone were a comforting reminder that I was not alone, that he had left a way I could follow. As I moved away from the circle, a new determination came inside me. He was ready to follow my father's invisible trail, to decipher the signs he had left, and to find the answers that would unite our past to the present. The forest around me seemed to breathe with me, as if approving my decision to continue. I knew that the way ahead would not be easy, but every track, every symbol, each discovery brought me closer to the reunion with my father, or at least the understanding of what it had considered important enough to draw on your map. As I walked back the rail that would lead me to the next destination, I felt that it was exactly where it should be, in the heart of a mystery that promised to reveal much more than I could imagine. I was there, still in the clearing, when my cell phone vibrated in my pocket, a sharp and unexpected sound that cut silence like a blade. The number on the screen was unknown, a set of digits that meant nothing, but, for some inexplicable reason, made my heart accelerate. The wind ceased, as if the forest itself arrested the breath, awaiting the unfolding of what was coming. I answered the call with trembling fingers, the sense of anticipation weighing on me like a wet blanket. "Hello?" My voice sounded weak, almost like an echo of myself, resonating in the vastness of that space. On the other end of the line, silence. A deep and oppressive silence, loaded with unnamed meanings, as if the whole world was waiting for a whisper that could change everything. So finally, I heard a weak voice, almost a murmur, as if the words had traveled through an abyss of time. "You're too close." 4 words that were like thunder in a clear sky, reverberating in my mind with a sharp clarity. It was my father's voice. I knew at that moment, without a doubt, that it was him, despite the years that had passed, despite the distance that separated us. The floor seemed to move under my feet, the clearing spinning in a whirlwind of emotions while trying to process the impossible. My father was alive, and he was trying to reach me. I treated whole, a mixture of relief, fear, and hope running through my veins like liquid fire. "Father?" My voice hesitated, carrying all the weight of years of unanswered questions, from past nights in silent vigil waiting for a sign, for anything that could bring me back to him. But before I could say anything else, the call fell, leaving me with the echo of his words still reverberating in my ear. The silence that followed was deafening, an emptiness that threatened to swallow me as I desperately tried to repay, my fingers moving with a frantic urgency. But the call was not completed, and every failed attempt was like a needle drilling my newly designed hope. I stayed there, with the phone still pressed against my ear, as if I could force the connection to re-establish itself by the will of will. My heart was beating out, each pulse a reminder of the surreal reality in which I found myself. He was alive. He tried to warn me. But what did that mean? Too close. Of what? The clearing around me seemed to have become, the shadows stretching into forms that challenged logic, as if nature itself were reacting to what had just happened. The symbol on the floor, the initials recorded on the stone, everything seemed to vibrate with a new energy, an urgency that I could not fully understand. With every passing second, the determination within me grew. I needed to understand. I needed to find out what my father was trying to tell me. If he thought I was too close, then maybe he was on the right track. Maybe the clues he had left, the puzzles he had created, were really guiding me to a truth he wanted me to find out. Slowly, I kept my cell phone in my pocket, still feeling the weight of the unconnected connection. The clearing, once a place of stillness and contemplation, now seemed to be pulsate with the promise of answers, a reunion that seemed increasingly possible. I knew I couldn't stop, that giving up now would be a betrayal of my father's effort to communicate, to guide me through the distance that separated us. I looked one last time to the circle of stones, the symbol on the floor, and felt the presence of my father there, as if he were beside me, whispering words of encouragement that only my heart could hear. I was too close, he had said, and that meant it was on the right track. With a renewed determination, I prepared to move on, ready to face whatever was waiting for me at the next point of the map, and even more determined not to rest until I found my father. Destiny seemed to call me, and I was ready to answer, every step taking me closer to the truth he had left behind. I knew the road would be arduous, but the promise of answers and the possibility of meeting my father was enough incentives to face any challenge. With my heart hitting hard and the spirit indomitable, I left the clearing, following the path he had traced, determined to unravel the mystery he had begun. I was there, on the deserted road that seemed to extend infinitely, a lonely wire weaving the arid desert until it disappears on the horizon. The sun wholly teens, the sky of gold and red tones, painting a melancholy beauty picture that contrasted with the weight on my chest. Each step on the loose gravel resonated as a reminder of the isolation of that place, a forgotten corner of the world where time seemed to have stopped. My father's map had guided me there, and I couldn't help but feel that I was about to cross an invisible threshold, a line between the known and the unknown. The air was standing, heavy, as if nature itself arrested breathing in anticipation to what was to come. The trees, sparse and twisted, rose as silent sentinels, keeping old secrets under their elongated shadows. It was then that I spotted the marked tree, the only one in the field of view that seemed to have an almost magnetic presence. The mark of the star symbol on the trunk was unmistakable, drawn with precision that spoke of my father's careful hand. The symbol pulsed with a meaning that I could not yet understand completely, but it attracted me irresistibly, as a promise of revelations that were about to be unearthed. I knelt, the cold, dry earth under my knees as I began to dig with hands, feeling the earth give in gently under my fingers. Each handful of soil removed was like peeling layers of mystery, each movement a step closer to the truth he had hidden there. Finally, my fingers touched something solid, a notebook, its leather cloak worn and stained, but still resistant, as if waiting for that moment. Carefully, I removed the notebook from the hole, shaking the Poe. It was covered as a silent cloak. As he opened it, the familiar smell of aged paper and faded ink involved me, transporting me back to simpler times, when my father's stories were my world. On the first page, his unmistakable handwriting greeted me, firm letters that told a story that he could not end in person. If you got here, it's because I couldn't go back. The words were like a punch in the stomach, a reality that I had avoided fully facing. My father was no longer in the living world, and that notebook was his farewell, a last effort to communicate with me, to protect me from the shadows that swallowed his life. Don't trust anyone who says you saw me. The warning was clear, sharp as broken glass. He knew that the danger stared, that there were strengths that could not be fought with weapons or words. There was something dark in those words, an insinuation that the truth was more complex and sinister than I could imagine. Keep living. This last line, although loaded with sadness, was also a reminder of hope, a promise that, even in the absence, he still wanted me to thrive, to find happiness and meaning beyond his loss. My heart squeezed with the pain of longing, but also with the determination of honoring his desire. I closed the notebook with a deep sigh, feeling the weight of everything he represented. There was more there than a simple farewell. It was a legacy, an invitation to look beyond appearances and seek the truth that he could not dig up. I knew it would have to be careful, that every step from then on would need to be calculated, because the shadows that had taken my father still hung, invisible, around me. I got up, the notebook firmly safely in my hands, and looked around, to the silent vastness around me. My father's final destination was not a place where easy answers were found, but it was a starting point for something bigger, something he believed I could conclude. The road in front of me was deserted, but I knew it was far from being alone. My father was with me, in spirit, in every line he had traced, in every word he had written. As the sun was put, throwing long shadows on the ground, I felt an unexpected peace wrap me. I had found what I was looking for, but I had also discovered that my journey was far from over. There was more to unravel, more to understand, and I was determined to move on, living according to the legacy my father had left. With one last look at the marked tree, I turned and started walking back the road, ready to face whatever the future brought, knowing that I was equipped with the knowledge and love my father had left me. I was there, sitting at the kitchen table with my father's notebooks scattered in front of me, like a complex puzzle waiting to be mounted. The darkness of the night wrapped the house, and the only light came from the yellowish lamp that hung over me, throwing long and distorted shadows on the walls. Each page was a portal to his world, a window to the thoughts and concerns that had consumed it, and I felt the weight of his discoveries resting on my shoulders. With a deep sigh, I began to flip off the notes once more, trying to see beyond the words, seeking to understand what he had seen. The names circulated in red caught my attention as headlights in the midst of the storm, each one a disappearance story that seemed to have an unlikely outcome. My father's words echoed in my mind, "Don't trust anyone who says he saw me." And now, looking at those notes, I started to understand why. Each name had a peculiar story. People who, according to records, had disappeared without traces, just to reappear years later, as if nothing had happened. It was as if time has doubled over himself, erasing memories of what should have been a trauma, a striking event. Some of these individuals lived common lives, apparently untouched by the mystery of their disappearance. But there was something more ominous, something that made my stomach turn around. There were records of people who were officially dead, but were seen by friends and family years after their funerals. The idea was absurd, almost impossible to accept. But my father's notebooks were full of detailed reports, witness interviews, old newspaper articles, all corroborating their discoveries. It was as if he had plunged into a parallel world where the rules of reality were malleable, where the impossible became possible, but at a cost that I could not yet fully understand. The questions accumulated in my mind, each more disturbing than the previous one. What did it mean, all this? How these people were given S as killed, just to resurface without memories of what happened? And more importantly, what was my father's role in all this? Was he trying to protect them? Or was you looking for answers to understand your own destination? A sudden wave of heat traveled my body when a terrible possibility arose in my mind. What if my father had discovered something he shouldn't? Something so dangerous that led you to disappear? Perhaps he was too close to the truth, and the same forces he investigated silenced him. It was a paralyzing thought, but it made sense in the face of what I had discovered. The sound of a car passing outside brought me back to the present, the roar of the engine reverberating through the house as if confirmed the urgency of the situation. I looked around me, the familiarity of the kitchen contrasting with the whirlwind of emotions inside me. The connection between names, disappearances, and reappearances was clear now, an intricate network of secrets that my father had tried to untie, and in the center of everything was his own absence, a piece that I could not fully fit. With trembling hands, I took one of the notebooks again, flipping through to a specific page where my father had written, "Sometimes the answers are where we least expect it. Don't give up." His words were a balm, a promise that he was still with me, guiding me through the mist of uncertainty. I knew I couldn't stop there. There was more to find out, but understand. My father's investigation was not just about the disappearances, but about something much bigger, something that challenged understanding and required the courage I didn't know I had. But for him, I was willing to face anything, following each track, to unravel each secret until the truth was finally revealed. With a renewed determination, I closed the notebooks and kept them carefully. The night was still young, and the road ahead promised to be long and full of challenges. But I was ready to move on, to honor my father's legacy, and to find out what really happened to him. He knew the journey would be arduous, but he also knew that somewhere he would be watching me, proud that I had chosen not to give up. I got up, feeling the weight of responsibility, and the hope of a reunion that now seemed closer than ever. I was determined to find out the truth, to find my father, or at least understand what he considered important enough to risk his life. And with this promise in my heart, I prepared myself for whatever I came next, holds that it was on the right track, guided by the light of his love and wisdom. I was there, sitting on the same bench of the kitchen where so many revelations had been unearthed, with my father's map before me, his family lines now loaded with meaning that I could barely understand. The silence of the night was heavy, almost palpable, an invisible cloak involving the house, and made me feel like I was on the verge of a cliff, about to dive into the unknown. With trembling hands and a breath that sounded high in the quiet atmosphere, I began to fold the map, as I did every night before bed. It was a ritual that had become part of me, a way to connect with him, to feel that he was still present in my life. But that night, something changed. When folding the paper, I noticed a slight resistance, a crease that should not be there. My fingers hesitated for a moment, a mixture of curiosity and fear running through my veins. Slowly, I unfolded the map, letting it extend completely on the table. And that's when I realized there was more there than I thought. Hidden lines, stuck that had been hidden in the folds of the paper, as secrets waiting to be unraveled. The new lines were subtler, more delicate, as if my father had designed them in a moment of haste or hesitation. They stretched beyond the points I had already visited. They connected to the paths that led to even further, to places I had not considered before. Each line was an invitation and a challenge, a reminder that my journey was far from over. Fear squeezed my heart. What did those additional paths mean? What did my father want me to find out? Each new line was a promise of answers, but also a warning that these answers could not be what I expected or wanted. If he had designed it all before disappearing, perhaps he was still alive, hidden somewhere where only I could find him. Or maybe, following these new trails, I was putting myself in the same dangerous path that led him to disappear. I felt a chill through my spine, the reality of what was before me weighing like an anchor, the desire to understand, to find out what really happened to my father. It was overwhelming. But at the same time, the fear of the unknown, of what I could find at the end of these new ways, was equally paralyzing. It was like being in a cross, with each direction promising as much as it threatened. I was silent there, trying to calm the storm of emotions inside me. The decision to move on was not easy, but I knew I had no choice. My father had trusted me to continue his search, to find out the truth he could not finish. And even if fear tried to stop me, the promise of answers, understanding, and possible reunion was too strong to ignore. With a deep sigh, I bent the map again, now with a new understanding of its complexity. I knew I needed to prepare, to plan each step carefully, because the new lines on the map could lead to places that would challenge my courage and determination. But I also knew that with each step, I would get me closer to the truth, more than my father wanted me to find out. I got up, fixing the map in a safe place where I could consult it whenever necessary. The night was still young, and the promise of a new day brought with it the hope of new discoveries. I was willing to face any challenge, following each line, each symbol, until the mystery of its disappearance was finally resolved. At that moment, I realized that despite the fear, I was exactly where I should be. The journey in front of me was scary, but also full of potential and promises. With a heavy heart of uncertainty, but also full of hope, he was ready to move on, determined to find my father, or at least the answers he had left behind. The destination was drawn, the lines were drawn, and I was ready to answer the call, to follow the map my father had designed, knowing that in the end, the truth would be revealed. It was time to dive into the unknown, to face whatever was waiting for me, and to find out if the legacy he left me was a way for the reunion or warning of a shared destination.